everyone, Aaron here from Rudy Visuals. Hope everyone is doing well. In today's video, we are reviewing this. This is the Dell XPS 17, primarily from the point of view of a content creator editing videos and photos, doing some graphic design work, and also from someone who enjoys a little bit of gaming as well on the side. And after using it for a couple of weeks and comparing it with my own personal laptop, the Asus Zephyrus G15, and my editing and gaming PC, I think that this is not worth the money for most people. So let's take a look at the specs of this particular XPS 9730. So this is spec'd with the 13th gen i7 13700H. It also has an RTX 4070 GPU with 8GB of VRAM, a whopping 64GB of DDR5 memory, as well as a massive 4TB SSD, and also comes with the 4K touch screen. Now for a configuration like this, it's gonna set you back north of $4,000. So this is not a joke. If it was my money personally, I'd save a bit and go for maybe the 32 gigs and maybe like a lower end GPU. I think there are definitely some better deals out there simply in terms of just like bang for your buck. So before we get into anything else, let's just dive straight into the meat and bones, the performance, because bottom line, that's the most important thing. So we ran a mixture of productivity, CPU, and gaming performance benchmarks, and to compare, I ran the same benchmarks on my trusty Asus G15 as well as my main editing gaming PC, just to see how it compares, and specs on the screen now. Now just do keep in mind that my G15 does have a higher tier 3080 GPU, but much less system RAM, and an older CPU with less physical cores, whereas the XPS 17 has a lower tier 4070 that's one generation newer, but 4 times more system memory, and a newer Intel Raptor Lake CPU with more physical cores. And our desktop PC is also about 2 to 3 years old now, but is of course, it's built with desktop class components. So in theory, it should still keep up in most applications. And another important thing to remember is both my G15 and my editing PC cost less than £2,000. So that's less than half the total cost of this XPS 17. Kicking off with Cinebench R23, both for multi and single core, the XPS 17 pulled ahead here with a decent lead, something I was expecting with that newer CPU and with its 14 cores. Good start for the XPS 17 here. But when we look at the Puget Bench scores for DaVinci Resolve and Premiere, the desktop PC took the lead here with the XPS 17 in second place, not too far behind it, but beating out the G15 quite handily. Now I think in this case, the 64GB of RAM in the XPS 17 is probably playing its part here, so it'd be interesting to see how the G15 would have done if it had the same amount of memory. This is also the case with Photoshop, and in this instance, the XPS 17 actually pulled ahead of the desktop PC, which is not too surprising, seeing as Photoshop is more CPU and RAM dependent rather than GPU. And with that faster DDR5 memory on the XPS versus the slower DDR4 memory on the PC. Moving on to PC Mark 10, a good benchmark for overall system performance and productivity. The XPS 17 again took second place behind the desktop PC, with the G15 coming in last. 3D Mark Time Spy, however, saw the XPS 17 come in last, with the G15 in second place and the PC retaining first place. And this was surprising, as I was expecting the newer mobile RTX 4070 GPU to flex its muscles here a little bit, but this just shows that an older but higher tier 3080 is still outperforming it, and the desktop class 3070 is still faster than both. Unfortunately, we see the same pattern here in our gaming benchmarks, as the XPS 17 came pretty much last in all of our gaming tests. To make it fair, we did run the games at 1440p to match the native resolutions of the desktop monitor and our G15, as our XPS 17 has that nice 4K screen. So in Total Warhammer, for example, at ultra settings, the XPS 17 could not even achieve 60 frames per second in the battle benchmark. In a slightly older title like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the XPS 17 fares better here, probably due to the better CPU single core performance, but both laptops still fall way behind the desktop PC. And in a more modern title, namely Cyberpunk, which is a pretty demanding game, there was no scenario where the XPS 17 did not come in last with DLSS off and on, and in the game's ultra preset. Bearing in mind you can get more playable frame rates if you just turn down high, medium settings, maybe down to 1080p. However, what this does is really illustrates how games still don't really take advantage of all that extra system performance. So the 64GB here in the XPS 17 is just kind of wasted, and that higher core count again not really amounting to much in reality. So if you are a gamer, it is kind of hard to recommend the XPS 17 on this basis. For productivity, it looks a little bit better on paper, but price performance is still questionable. Just considering how much more expensive the XPS 17 is, we're not really seeing the double the performance over the G15s. Quite far from it, to be honest. Next, let's talk about the design and build quality, because I think that's a really big selling point of the XPS 17. Without question, this is it's a beautiful, gorgeous laptop. You are paying that premium for everything from the machine milled silver aluminium on the outer body, the black carbon fiber panel, that massive trackpad, the huge, vibrant, color accurate screen. It's just a laptop that exudes sort of class and luxury, and unlike kind of like more like gaming focused laptops, I think this just looks a lot more mature and would fit in just as well in a boardroom as it would amongst the kind of hipster MacBook crowd at your local cafe. Now, personally, I do prefer the look of gaming laptops. I think they just have a bit more personality, whereas I find the laptops like the XPS and MacBooks, while they look modern and sleek, they're a little bit boring, whereas the G15 for me has a bit more personality, but that's just my personal preference. It is also fairly thin too, but doesn't feel flimsy whatsoever. As you can see, it is extremely solid and weighs around 2.4-ish kilograms. Screen flex is pretty much minimal, and if you push down on the keyboard, it literally stays put. I also really like the keyboard on this machine. It's got short travel distance and zero keycap wobble. It's snappy and very comfortable, but my only issue is that it feels ever so slightly cramped, so I do find it a little bit tricky to get really up to speed and super accurate with it. It is backlit though, which is always a plus. And while I always use a mouse about 95% of the time, I really do love this massive trackpad. It's just a joy to use. Now, one issue I had with our old XPS 15 was the webcam was awkwardly placed towards the bottom of the screen. Thankfully, that is now fixed with this, and I think most of the newer XPS models. It is only a 720p webcam though, and it doesn't look particularly good, which kind of sucks on a supposedly premium laptop, but to fit any webcam at all on this tiny bezel, I guess, is a good achievement anyway. Speaking of bezels, we definitely have to talk about the screen, because it is actually 100% my favorite thing about the XPS 17, and probably the thing that's gonna sell you this laptop. You can get a cheaper 1080p screen, but this is the full fat 4K 500 nit IPS glossy touchscreen, and it also has a 16:10 aspect ratio, meaning you can get a little bit of extra height compared to usual screens. Now, this is actually amazingly useful for creative work, as you get more space for your timeline, for example, when video editing, or a little bit of extra room to see your images when editing photos. It also looks freaking amazing. It's extremely sharp and vivid with amazing color accuracy right out of the box. We're talking 100% of the sRGB color space, 99% NTSC, 100% of the Adobe RGB, and 98% of P3, making this a fantastic choice for any kind of color accurate work. Now, I did need to use a color calibration tool as the screen was skewing a little bit too warm, so just something to be aware of. The only other downside I can think of is that it only has a 60 Hz refresh rate. Now, I personally really like higher refresh rates. Even if you're not gaming, just having it for a kind of a smoother scrolling and navigating through browsers and apps, it just feels so much better to me. So it was a little bit disappointing that that's not an option here. That being said, it's just such a beautiful looking screen, I can almost forgive it. So for both content consumption and creation, it is an absolute joy to behold. It's hard to really see it on camera, so it's hard to describe, but for me, almost justifies that hefty price tag. In terms of ports and I/O, the XPS 17 is decent. On the right side, there's an SD card reader, 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and a headphone to microphone combo jack. And on the left side, there's 2 more Thunderbolt 4 ports and a lock slot. It also comes with an additional dongle with a 1 USB port and a single HDMI 2.0 port. I am quite old school in that I like laptops with lots of ports, but honestly, I think we're at a stage now where we're kind of used to living that dongle life. And to be fair, Thunderbolt 4 does support DisplayPort and power delivery, so I think the I/O is okay. The XPS 17 also features quad stereo speakers with 2 down-firing subwoofers, and it honestly sounds pretty good for a laptop. Decent bass without being too distorted, but if I'm completely honest, I do use headphones or have my Bluetooth speakers connected most of the time. If we open up the XPS 17, which is fairly straightforward to do, you'll see there is 2 available RAM slots, both of which are being currently occupied here in this configuration, and also 2 M.2 slots, so there is room for an additional storage if you need it. Finally, the 97 watt-hour battery gave me around about 6-ish hours of general usage, going down to about 2 to 3 for editing videos without rendering and playing some lighter games. So in conclusion, is the XPS 17 worth it? Now, there's no debating that this is a really well-built, beautiful looking laptop with a sumptuous screen, but going back to the performance, I'm really not so sure. If you have the budget to spend and you don't care too much about pound for pound value, you simply want the best looking mobile editing or content creation laptop that money can buy with this amazing screen and the luxurious build quality that's not from Team Apple, then the XPS 17 is a candidate for sure. If color accurate work is essential for you, for example, then you need a laptop that's not a desktop, then maybe that screen justifies the price tag for you. That was kind of the main reason Weronika chose this laptop. So if you have around £3,000, this Asus M16, for example, on paper looks like a much better deal to me and should outperform the XPS 17 for both productivity and games, and you still have another £1,000 to play around with. So it just makes it really hard for me to say yes, go out and get the XPS 17. While it's unquestionably a great laptop in some ways, I think there's just smarter ways to spend your money. But let me know if you agree. Let me know also what laptop you are using, or if you're like me and you like to use a desktop, in the comment section down below. That's gonna do it for this video. If you found it helpful, give the video a like, subscribe, all that good stuff that the YouTube algorithm likes. You can also follow us on socials down here. And I think that's it for this video. I guess I'll see you on the next one. Peace.